Okay, so I'd like to say a huge thank you to Beth to inviting me to talk tonight about something that I feel really passionate about, and that's dyscalculia, maths anxiety. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of background about myself, but also about the Dyscalculia network. Okay, so I've been trained as a special needs teacher for many, many years now, and I quickly discovered that the maths part of that sort of job was completely unresourced and had lots of holes and just needed more work on it. It was kind of like an unknown quantity back in 2019 when we set up the network. And we've got four main aims. It's set up with myself and Kat Edel, and we're both maths teaching specialists. And we just felt it was the poor relation in terms of special educational needs. So we felt it needed raising awareness of dyscalculia, but also maths difficulty. You can still go around and speak to different schools across the country, and some people haven't heard of it. Also, the name of dyscalculia is really difficult to pronounce. And so the best way to explain how it sounds is it rhymes with Julia. So we're trying to raise awareness of dyscalculia maths difficulties, because not all of the people are dyscalculic, and we'll go on to that in a minute. We also, via the website, we provide an exclusive dyscalculia specialist, assessor, and tutor directory. This means that if a parent needs some help with someone that's struggling with maths, they can put their postcode into the finder, and it will bring up with a list of assessors that are in their area. So it means that we don't get involved in that financially, and it provides a really good, simple service to help people. We also like to empower and advise adults with dyscalculia. When we set it up, we were both sort of educators in schools mainly, and we thought that the Dyscalculia network would be aimed primarily at school children. But it quickly came to light that it's a bigger problem in the UK than just the people in education, because adults were contacting us saying all of those symptoms you describe is actually me. So what can you advise and help to do for me? So we've set up an advisory board full of people that have dyscalculia or people that work as assessors. There's a couple of pictures here of our sort of chairman of the advisory board for adults, Peter Cherry. And we provide lots of information to people writing in, calling in about what to do if they've got sort of specific issues with maths difficulties. And then finally here, we do a lot of dyscalculia maths difficulty training. So that can take many forms. We do one-to-one training for individual teachers or head of or Senkos. We do lots of training for TAs, which I feel quite passionate about, because they tend to be the ones that are advised to do the intervention. And so we do a lot of training with them. It can be online and it can be face-to-face. So that's a bit of background about the network. Okay, a bit about dyscalculia now, the context. Well, it's estimated that there's around 6% of the UK, the British population, that suffer from dyscalculia. So if my maths is correct, that's about 4 million people, of which there's about 1 million children in schools and higher education that will suffer from dyscalculia. But just to show you the context of how badly represented it is in terms of special educational needs, there's this recent study that's been done by the University of Loughborough, where the centre of most of the research is being conducted. And they carried out this in a number of primary school pupils, about 2,500. And on average, they expected to find about a quarter of the people that required some level of SEND support. They found that of that sample size that they had 108 that was diagnosed with dyslexia, which is a little bit low, because I think the percentage of dyscalculics and the percentage of dyslexics are roughly the same in the UK. And so that was a little bit low, just under 4.5%. But at the whole sample size of 2,500, they only found one official diagnosis of dyscalculia. That's really poor when there should be as many as 108 as people that have dyslexia. So looking at those numbers, you're 100 times less likely to be diagnosed if you've got dyscalculia. It tends to go under the radar, and also to have the right support that you need to help you develop. So it just goes to show it really is the poor relation in terms of special educational needs. What is it? So the current definition, and this is going to possibly change in the next 6 months because there's a committee looking at how we can define this a little bit better. But at the moment, I would say the two important words here is the specific and persistent difficulty in understanding numbers. So that means it doesn't reside in one part of maths. Doesn't mean that they're no good with fractions, but they're good at everything else. It's a persistent over time. It's a consistent issue with understanding numbers, and it occurs across all socioeconomic groups, different age ranges, levels of education, male, female. There's no split that's evidenced on that at the moment, and also abilities. So you could have a really clever, smart individual, but he could suffer from dyscalculia. And the way to judge maths difficulties is to look at things as a continuum, where dyscalculia is at the end of the continuum, and where they have real struggles with that sort of maths ability. So I think what's really important is to understand kind of what's going on with our pupils. And I've put this infographic here because I'm a very visual learner, and I love this. It really explains everything really well. It's a checklist of all of the sort of main indicators of dyscalculia or maths difficulties. And I'll just whip around them. It's subitizing. Subitizing is the innate ability to recognize a small cluster of objects. All mammals tend to have this skill, but people with dyscalculia struggle to understand this. And what you find is for very small numbers, you'll have them counting, and often with their finger. So they'll look here, they'll go 1, 2, 3. They won't be able to see that represents 3 without counting. That's subitizing. It's most mammals and birds actually have the same skill in subitizing. You can imagine on a pond, mother duck looking around, obviously not being able to count, but she's able to sort of recognize that all of the ducklings are there behind her. So that's the innate subitizing. I think working memory and short-term memory are really important factors, and all of the people that have dyscalculia will have issues and challenges with this, both key parts of memory. Estimating, lots of pupils that I've worked with really don't understand and have a good idea for estimating how long something is, how much. Peter Cherry, who's head of our adult board, always tells me that the question he hates the most is when someone at work says to him, how much do you think that is? Or how long do you think it took me to drive? He has no clue, because they don't understand or have an appreciation of estimating. In classes that I've run where we worked on measurement, I always get the pupils to sort of write in an estimation of how wide something is or how long something is, and I get lots of answers that vary from a computer screen is like 3 meters long, because they have no concept or no abilities in estimating. It also means that if you have got they're writing an answer that's completely unrealistic, they're never going to see that it's unrealistic in your calculation. There's left and right sequencing, a big issue. That's also why a lot of dyscalculics flip numbers, so that the number 3 ends up looking like completely the other way, or the 5 looks like a 2 and vice versa. So it's this sort of ability to order with sequence and directionality. I think one of the biggest serious problems that dyscalculics have is the ability to calculate effectively. What I mean by that is they have an over-reliance on counting in ones. If you have a sum that says 8 plus 5, They may even count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then count 5 more, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 to get to an answer. So it's that over-reliance in ones. And it makes it even harder when they're doing subtraction because they're counting backwards. And do I count from the number I'm on? Say 13 take away 5. Do I count 13 as the first one, or do I count 12 as the first one? So their over-reliance in counting in ones will mean that they're going to have difficulty and being inaccurate. Also, it's going to take some time because they're not going to be able to do this very quickly because they're going to have issues with processing. I think dyscalculics have problems seeing stuff, patterns. So when you have something like 4 plus 17, they're really not clear on that 7, that's commutative, so it's going to be 17 plus 4 is the same thing. So lots of sort of issues here, but the impact of dyscalculia as a real barrier to learning, it's really important, and it varies in degree according to the learning and teaching environment. That's such a key statement because it means that we all can impact on these learners. It's not like a lost cause. You know, we'll go on to sort of some tips on how to sort of help these pupils in a minute, but it's really important, that learning and teaching environment. This checklist is available as a free download from the Scottish Education website. If you Google Scottish Education, I think there'll also be some links in the handout that's sent out after this finishes, but it's from the Scottish website. So why can't some children do maths? Well, there's a lot of general factors that makes math hard to learn. First of all, it's particularly abstract subject. Some children and dyscalculics struggle even to identify what a number is. You know, they might view the number 3 as bigger than number 5 because it's drawn bigger. So they have a really difficult understanding. The digits represent to them like a foreign language. Maths is really complex as well. It involves quantity. It has its own language. You know, I don't understand why there's like 7 or 8 different ways of saying add, you know, plus, more than, and the total of, sum of, what's more than. It just really makes it complex. And to add in the 3D space elements into that as well, when we're talking about volume and capacity, things like that. I guess this next point, the way that maths is taught in schools, I think to become a maths teacher, especially in secondary school, you're absolutely passionate about it and you know you really love it. But I think the maths teachers that I've come across really have no training or a lack of understanding about what to do, not in all cases, but what to do to help people that are struggling with maths and are dyscalculic. I think there's an over concentration on learning things by rote. You know, the times table tests and times table rock stars doesn't do any favors to these children who just become more anxious if they're given being told to do things quickly. So we have to be aware of that and teach more in reasoning terms so that they may not remember it because they have issues with their working memory or their short-term memory, but they need to be taught techniques to be able to get to the answer relatively quickly rather than remember it by rote. I think there's also a huge lack of concrete resources in schools. In particular, in secondary schools, there seems to be some sort of black hole between year 6 and year 7, where they tend to sort of all fall into. And in some places, in some schools, concrete materials, Cuisenaire rods, counters and things like that are seen as babyish and not to be used in secondary school. This is not true. I think because it's so abstract subject, the more and more we allow the children to prove what the relationship is between two sets of numbers or a conceptive area or perimeter, if we can prove that and demonstrate that, it becomes more effective. I think we also need to be aware that these children who dyscalculics and struggling with maths we need to sort of be slow down. Yeah, I know there's an emphasis in a lot of schools and a lot of pressure from parents, etc., to go fast, but we can't with these children. That would just sort of switch them off and make them more anxious. So I guess in summary, we think of maths. If someone says to me, what's maths? How would you describe maths learning? So we regard it as kind of a building block, modular subject. And there's a really good way of like putting that, and we call it the Jenga effect. So here we have two pictures of the Jenga game. Hopefully everyone knows this game. It's where you have to pick bricks out from the bottom and place them on the top. This Jenga tower on the left is a typical dyscalculia, where some of the key foundation areas are missing. Or whatever, it's through bad teaching, they were off sick, they didn't get it, it was rushed, whatever. The key foundation areas are missing. So, and as they develop in their years in school, they'll be sort of trying to perform at the top of the tower, you know. But what we're saying is to make things effective and to really to teach dyscalculic and maths difficulties pupils, is we need to sort of peel right back and look at where the things start to go wrong. So you could be intervening and teaching someone with struggles with fractions, because that's what they're doing in class. But what we're saying is that you need to look at the fundamentals of maybe that they can't divide or they can't multiply effectively. So that means that all of the fraction type work you'll be doing is not going to be effective, and it's not going to be able to be secured. So modular effect, Jenga, we need to sort of look at where things start to go wrong to begin with before we do the advanced levels. Otherwise, the whole tower is going to fall over. So how can a firm foundation be built for these pupils? So we need to be on the lookout for maths difficulties. It's really important. The earlier, the better. So no matter how young, if they're having some of those issues mentioned in the indicators slide, we need to sort of be on it and make everyone aware that, you know, we want to do some investigation for what's going on. On our website, on the Dyscalculia Network website, there's a really good checklist that you can download for free, where it's simply designed. So it's a simple traffic light tick box. So you have, are they exhibiting this indicator? Then it goes a tick in the green. If they're not, sometimes it goes in the amber. So it's a really simple traffic light system. And at the end of the page, you can just see if there's more reds, it's the danger. So they have to sort of, you have to do further investigation. And assessment is key here, because we really need to know what the child knows and what they don't know. It's not a case of just finding out what they don't know, because we need to sort of work on their strengths and develop that to be able to sort of do the bits that they can't do. And using the analogy of the Jenga tower, intervention needs to be below the area when things start to go wrong. Let me explain that a bit. Because if a child has dyscalculia and struggling with maths, then they're going to have lots of failure. They're going to not be able to understand things. They're going to have lots of lessons in school where they're not able to sort of like keep up with the rest of their peers and find it really, really hard. So whenever I have the first lesson and I've done my assessment, and I know exactly what they can do and what they can't do, I put the first lesson with that child as something that they can do, because I want them to walk out of that lesson saying, great, you know, this new maths teacher is pretty good because I can do that stuff. And that's a mindset change, you know, because they've had so many failures. So you want to peel back to something they can do and feel successful in what they're doing. So we also like to use the concrete, pictorial, verbalized, abstract approach. So to use concrete materials to sort of demonstrate, you know, practicing number bonds. You might want to sort of use Cuisenaire rods. You might want to build a rod staircase to sort of do that. If you're working on what are components for 9, what numbers make 9. So you can do lots of practice with that to show the relationship between them. You can use counters. A lot of people use Numicon, the base 10 stuff. Really important stuff to prove this is how it works. And I always move on to the pictorial. It's good to sort of get them to sort of draw diagrams to, you know, to put what the next stage in the thinking is. This is a new one as well, because over the course of the last few years, I think it's become really important to get them to verbalize what they're doing. I've had a number of students that are saying, okay, I'm doing column addition, and this is how I do it. I do this column first. Oh, I just realized I've done the wrong column. If you get them to verbalize it, it really does help to spot errors. And if they're talking it through and you're listening, you have a really good understanding of what they know. Because sometimes if they don't verbalize it, they might just have learned by rote how it works. But in order to explain it, it's a high level of learning. That's a really important approach to learning maths, and it really does help. You do all of those things before you get onto the abstract concepts, and it's much more effective. We also like to do scaffold learning. So we just said before, we start the questions the child can do, and then gradually build up. I also like to sort of give my pupils an idea of what the lesson's going to be about. There's no surprises. They understand what's going on, and I give them the headings. So if I've got 3 or 4 teaching topics in a lesson, then that's what the headings will be on. And so if you are working with someone that has some of the other special needs, educational needs, like ADHD, and they lose concentration or focus, then they've got the headings to come back to and to sort of get back onto the lesson where you are in that lesson. I think it's also important to break each teaching moment down into small component parts. If you're doing number bonds, you don't want to go too fast. You want to sort of show the number relationship. So if you're doing bonds for 10, you can do 2 and 8. So, and then you can have that as a Cuisenaire rod next to a 10 number. So you can see it's the same length, exactly the same, but it's made of 8 and 2. And also you can use that as for like a early subtraction. So you can start taking away the 2, and you see 10 take away 2, and I've got 8 left. So really breaking it down into small component parts. Maths games. So I think maths games are really important to my lessons. There's lots of games that are available for free on our website. We're always doing like new games, and it's pretty much every topic in maths that we have a game for. Here on this game on the left, the green and the red one, it's we call it area Tetris, and all you need is squared paper and 2 dice, and you take it in turns to sort of throw the 2 dice, and then if you got a 6 and a 4, you have to do one of the lengths of the rectangle is 6 and one of them is 4, and you're trying to fit it in onto your side of the page as best as you can. And the one when that stops, the one with the number of squares left, and it still has the less squares left here that's shaded, is the winner. Really, really simple game. Don't need much resources. Great to play, especially in secondary schools. And it's a really good way of explaining visually what area is all about. The why games. The learner doesn't realize they're learning, so you can ask questions. One of my favorite games is called Shut the Box, and it's a really simple game, numbers 1 to 9, and they throw the 2 dice, and they are able to add up the dice. Then they're able to decide what number to shut down and the numbers. If the number that they've rolled is what's already gone, it starts to introduce what makes that number, what's the components of that number. So they're doing it without realizing it. I've also lots of learners that come to me after school finishes or towards the end of the day. Usually more productive when you can get them to play a game, because they're normally tired, or they're just another sheet of questions to do. It also helps to make sense of what the number is. me. So like I said before, if you're playing shut the box and 7's already gone, I can look at, well, 7's made of 6 and 1, also 3 and 4 and 5 and 2. So I've got those options. And it really helps with flexibility in numbers. I use games a lot to start a lesson because I try to get that game to be about what I've been learning in the previous lesson. It means you get a really good recall, and you immediately get to see if they've learned and it's secure on what you're teaching in the last lesson. Less likely to give up. Who doesn't know a competitive child who wants to beat the teacher? And you can also, I think in larger lessons and classes, you can differentiate the game. Some of the games we play are really simple spinner games, and we change the sheet that's underneath them. So, for example, if you're doing times tables games, the table where the people are not so good at maths, you could put one of the lower tables, and then for the more able students, you can put a higher table, and everyone will think that they're playing the same game and they're getting the same results, but they're practicing their tables. You can ensure a positive outcome for the learner. Well, I think every time they beat the teacher, that's a huge positive outcome for them. And the amount of smiling and I see once that happens is brilliant. There's instant feedback we talked about before. And it's also an informal assessment. You can see what they learn and what they've retained and what they don't know. But I think the most important thing is to improve the confidence of the learner. They like to go, are we playing the game now? I get that question all the time. But also, it's a way of reducing maths anxiety. I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So, maths anxiety. So, maths anxiety is common in both children and adults. It often stems from probably one incident, but also can be repeated feelings of stress when confronted by doing some maths questions. The body stresses, and the immediate response to that stress is fight or flight. In a class, you can't really run away or you can't start fighting. Not in most classes anyway. So the adrenaline within their body is really like rocketing. And when that situation occurs, it generally leads to a shutdown, really completely wipes out your memory. Mind goes blank. So we have two types of reaction. We have the physical reaction to maths anxiety, and that can be nausea, sweating, heart palpitation, increased blood pressure. But I tend to think of the times table tests that used to be done regularly on Thursday in the school I worked. And there was always at least one or two pupils that were off with, we called it timetable stomachache on a Thursday morning, because they were really anxious about the times table tests, where you had to do as many questions as you can in a short period of time. The psychological effects are really quite significant as well. Memory loss, we talked about, the paralysis. I think loss of self-confidence is important as well, where they talk themselves down, thinking that you're the only one that feels this way because you're internalizing it. All of these factors will get worse over time. So there's what we'd say is there's an anxiety cycle of failure, where you start having anxiety. So you start feeling some negative maths experiences. So you tend to sort of then avoid doing maths. So rather than practice more, which happens in some topics, if you want to get better at playing the guitar, you just keep at it and keep trying until you get better and better. But with maths, what it tends to lead in is like avoiding it. I'm not going to do that. And then the preparations get less and worse, and their performance gets worse. So it's like this cycle of failure that gets worse and worse over time. And you need to sort of try and break. Some context of maths anxiety. So we have here 36% of 15 to 24-year-olds are anxious about maths. You have 10% of 8 to 13-year-olds that suffer from maths anxiety. We have a quarter or 25% of parents who openly state that they can't help their children with maths. That includes primary school maths as well. 40% of people can't split a bill. One of our advisors, adult advisors, who's dyscalculic, regularly told me this story the other day where she regularly goes to a restaurant with her best buddies, and she normally avoids getting the bill like the plague. She always manages to go to the bathroom or something. But this particular thing, a couple of weeks ago, she got caught with the bill, and she thought, great, I'm going to tap. And the restaurant server said, would you like to include a tip on that, madam? And she's dyscalculic. She doesn't understand numbers. She can't add up. She can't really subtract. So percentages is like a foreign language to her. So all she did was just press. I'm going to just press this button a few times, and then they'll go away. And then the manager of the restaurant came over to her a little while later and said, "Do you realize you've given 100% tip to this restaurant? I know we give a good service, but I think you've probably made a bit of a mistake here." And luckily, they went to the same restaurant, so they took it off. And she told him what she wanted, and he did it for her. So that's a real kind of issue with splitting the bill or percentages, knowing how much to tip people. And I think kind of one of the significant factors here as well is 74% of undergraduates don't have the mental skills, feel that they're not able to cope with daily life maths questions in their life and work. That's almost 3/4 of undergraduates that really struggle with maths and have anxiety around it. So what can we do in the classroom? Like we said before, the early identification, using the checklist to sort of start the ball rolling, to sort of start the investigating, the assessing going, looking at the indicators. So look out for physical signs. We talked about the stomach aches and looking at grounding techniques, but be mindful of the psychological impact as well. And what we try and do is, where possible, is to promote what we call a growth mindset. Avoid league tables. I've been into classrooms where there's league tables on the wall in terms of times table rock stars. And you can imagine the negative impact that has on the people at the bottom of that list. And also the people at the top of the list, when questioned, don't really understand the nature of multiplication. You know, if you ask them the question, they'll give you an immediate answer. 10 times 8 is 80. 11 times 8. Well, I think I know that one. 88. They have no clue what 12 times 8 is. They've not grasped that multiplication can be seen as repeated addition. So avoid league tables as much as possible. So you need to praise the process rather than the outcome. What I mean by that is, look at, you need to sort of play down the answer as the most important thing. Do they know the technique for calculating this question? Because then it becomes more open. They're really willing to risk giving a question a go, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm not so sure. You know, it's either black or white." We have to look at the categories and things that they're using. So reduce the emphasis on getting the right answer, which will reduce the maths anxiety over time. So I know this is hard, but to celebrate mistakes as a positive learning experience, you know, you can put emphasis that we really do learn by making mistakes, because then it sticks out in our memory much better, and we can think, oh, I remember that I did that last time. I did the wrong column. Because I read from left to right, I naturally will do the 100 first, then I'll do the tens, and then I'll do the ones. But I remember now that that's the mistake I kept making last week. So I need to sort of look at this again. I go from the smallest to the largest. I think also this is a really important word, yet. So I might not understand it, but we need to sort of put in the word yet. But I'm going to get there. but I'm just going to take my time and I'm going to do things step by step in those small steps we talked about before. So we're fostering a real like positive attitude, because I know I don't understand it all at the moment, but it's yet, and I'm going to get there as soon as I can. Also, you might need to adjust your teaching style. It's really important not to start new topics late in the afternoon. Did they get, because it's modular, did they get what we were talking about before? So I can build on that. So you need to sort of adjust your teaching style depending on the topics you're teaching, but also on the individuals. Are they morning people and you have the opportunity to do lessons in the morning? That's what you need to go for. And new topics need to be done when the pupils are fresh and ready to go. Chunk learning, break everything down into small parts. Doesn't matter. You need to take away the speed aspect of this. You need to sort of look for small wins. If they're doing bonds of 10 and they know half of them, brilliant. Let's say, well, let's use those that they do know to build on those to get to the other bonds of 10. Talked before about concrete picture or verbalize. Use manipulatives where possible. Really does help retain information. Key vocabulary. It's important to use words that the children are comfortable with. If they use subtraction as minus, start to use minus because they know that. We can do looking at posters to reinforce that. Having all of the words that come off the add sign with all the different words on it. And I sometimes get my pupil to sort of write their own word problem that goes with each question, and then I'll solve it. So again, using vary the language, but use language that they're understanding. I think maths is all around us is an underrated thing. I think it's really important to look at what's around us in terms of maths in their daily lives. I've got some pupils that absolutely love football, both boys and girls, and I do a lot of questions for them based around football. Other people like cooking and they like to cook things, and I do ratio questions around that and proportion. So they, if they work out how much sugar they need to make 8 brownies, chocolate brownies, how much sugar do I need to make 4 chocolate brownies? And you can see them thinking about it. Is it going to be more or is it going to be less? It does really help them to sort of like relate it to something that's all around them. Take away the pressure. Not learning by rote or timed examples. You have to give these pupils that struggle with dyscalculia and maths difficulty time to learn things. It's going to take time. It's going to take a long time with some of these issues with maths difficulties, but it's really important to take away that pressure. I put some points as well, what we can do at home. Practice little and often. In my house, it used to be that Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening was the time when my sons would do their homework. But over time, I encouraged them to do little and often. So they'll do a little bit every day rather than having that sort of 2-hour ineffective slog on a Sunday evening to get everything done. Practice work that's been taught already. So you're doing reinforcement. You shouldn't be teaching at home any new topics. They should be teaching what's already been done to make the pupils more fluent and to really get a deeper understanding of what they're talking about. As we said before, incorporate maths learning into everyday life. Are they getting change? How much change have they got? What does getting change mean? Does it mean addition or does it mean subtraction? And you need to demonstrate that using graphs and diagrams and concrete materials. Make maths fun. Really is fun if you can sort of introduce lots of games into your lessons, because they really look forward to it. There's also a really cool place up in Leeds called Maths City that does a whole day out experience of having fun with maths. A lot of parents in particular pass on their maths anxiety to their children. I wish I had £1 for every time I've heard, "Oh, I've never been any good at maths." That's immediately creating a really low threshold, lowering the bar for that child, saying they don't need to sort of try hard and they're never going to be any good at maths because mum or dad have said that. I think it's important to talk about anxiety, because anxiety, this maths anxiety, affects all people of different abilities. So if we can talk about it, we can find out when that instance was. It might be something really simple that we can overcome. And by overcoming that particular thing, we dissipate that anxiety. We have to communicate with your class teacher. What's saying that? So we're all teaching the same methods. We're all sort of understanding that they get anxious in certain situations. Perhaps we'll drop the times table rock stars tests on a Thursday morning because it makes it really anxious. And I think above all else, remain calm, because then you immediately will transpose that sort of feeling and understanding to the pupil. Sorry about that. So here I've got a couple of organizations that are involved in maths anxiety that will help you provide lots of resources. There's the Maths Anxiety Trust, which provides lots of information and about anxiety itself. They organize lots of events every year. Most of them are free. So Maths Anxiety Trust. I think these links will go out with the paperwork after the presentation. There's another group here called the Mathematics Anxiety Research Group at the University of Derby. It's headed up by Professor Tom Hunt, who is really great and approachable. And what they've done at the university is set up scales and tests, so you can sort of see just how anxious someone is. They go through the tests, and they're for any age group. They go through the test, and it gives you a score, and it indicates kind of just how anxious they are with doing some maths. And of course, the Dyscalculia Network. We're a community interest company, not for profit, and we have lots of information about maths, dyscalculia obviously, and maths anxiety on the website. I just want to sort of plug something that we've got coming up this week, actually, on Friday, on the 10th of November. We're calling it, and we have done for the last 3 years, Maths Anxiety Awareness Day. And we're trying to sort of raise awareness of this problem because it affects so many people, both in education and in the wider public. And so we've got these two events in particular that's divided into the Educator Conference, which is in the morning, 9:30 to 1:30. And then in the evening, we've got a parent conference. And we've got 4 or 5 speakers for both, really focused on maths anxiety, identifying and supporting pupils, maths anxiety and how to address it. We have teacher well-being, so really creating a psychologically safe environment. That's from Zena Hicks, and she's got so much experience in this field. She, after I went to her lecture, I felt so much better. But the parent one's really important as well. Tips to reduce anxiety at home. Talked about Math City up in Leeds, and we've got James, who's the chairman of that organisation, talking about how maths works at home. We have Zena to talk to the parents as well, and we've got also Dominic, who's part of the Maths Anxiety Research Group. Dominic has produced a whole series of books that are designed in a way that make them really much more approachable and friendly. And also we have March is going to come in at the end there and talk about breathing techniques to control any anxiety. I think we all suffer from some anxiety, but I think maths anxiety is way up there in terms of how anxious people are in education.